Okay, what we're doing today is we're cleaning out some Worm Factory 360s that I got from a customer who's quit doing it. And they were successful. There are still worms in the compost. I'm guessing they haven't been fed in a while. They're pretty small, and there's no eggs. Basically, these are the babies that hatched, and the adults have died. And this is basically the top of the bin where they left off. And as you can see, there's still a good amount of worms in here trying to survive. It's pretty wet, which is pretty typical of a 360. What I'm doing here is I'm basically just dumping it out into the garden. And what I'll do on top of that is this winter I'll put some compost on top of them, and the worms will crawl out even underneath the bin. Another problem with the 360 is it sticks to the plastic, and it's pretty wet. And there's still worms. I've got 4 360s here, and there's probably maybe a pound of worms in the whole 4 bins together. And well, like I say, I'll feed on top of this pile here, and then separate the worms, or collect the worms later. And then I'll work the castings into the soil. Now, this compost was newspaper clippings, or shredded newspaper, and food waste. No leaves. Another reason why it's a little bit clumpier than it would be if it was leaves. It's still a pretty good compost. Now, this is the one I just uncovered, and a lot of the worms have crawled down into this. What happens though, this is like the 3rd layer down, and it's real heavy and hard for the worms to travel in. And so it doesn't really do a lot of good for them to stay in this area. You want to move this bin from the bottom to the top, fluff it up, and then empty, and then let the worms crawl down into the good compost, and then take the compost out of that tray. If you so I got a black soldier fly living in here, basically hibernating for the winter, but we'll feed it to the chickens. So actually, as you can see, what happens is the compost settles and the tray is only half full. A full tray is 1 cubic foot. And so basically you're getting a half a cubic foot out of a tray when it's totally finished, which is about 2 to 2.5 gallons. Now, if I wanted to, I could put this in a dry area and fluff it up, and get it to dry out some more, and then harvest the worms out. But right now these worms are pretty underfed and pretty skinny, so I'm basically just letting them do what they want to do. But we'll clean these up and we'll sell these used Worm Factories on the website. A couple more things about the Worm Factory 360 is it's made just a little different from the original Worm Factory. These little trays here go underneath the bottom tray, and they're considered worm ladders. So if the worms get down into the compost leach, if they get in contact with the worm ladder, they can crawl back out. And then also on the lid on the 360 completely covers the top tray, so it can be out in the weather and not get too much water on it. It's always good to put your Worm Factory under an eave or something anyway, but this is also just extra protection. The original Worm Factory has a lid that goes inside the top tray, and it cannot be out in the weather. This also has like a little catch on the corner, so it'll stay in place. Windy day, it might fly away, but... And then the original Worm Factory has a tray that's cut out with feet and this one's got higher trays so that you can fit something under the spigot. It's built a little better than the original, but I wouldn't pay the extra. Okay, we're down to the bottom tray, and underneath here a lot of castings have fallen through, so basically the drainage on this had stopped some time ago. There are plenty of castings in the bottom tray, but that's not necessarily what it's for. So when you start your worm factory, you want to start with a piece of newspaper on the inside to keep all the castings from falling through into the bottom drain tray. What happens a lot of times when you get to the 5th and 6th or 4th and 5th tray of a worm factory, the bottom is no longer draining, and so it gets pretty mucky. So basically the easiest way to clean this out is with a putty knife. Some worms are going to get hurt, but right now it's a matter of getting the castings. As you can see, there is some gap here. These plastic bins, they have not been in the sun, but they have stretched from the weight of the compost, and that's how they wear out. The bin's got some warping to it, and then on the bottom it's kind of warped. They'll still work. They're just, as far as scraping it out with a nice flat putty knife, they don't quite come clean. After I get all this out, I'll hose them off, and there we go. Hose them off and clean them up. Put them back to work. So underneath this, we've got a good amount of castings. Now this is pure castings because the only way this got down here is because the worms deposited it while they were crawling around. So if you want your best castings, they're going to be at the bottom of your tray. There's also, there's a bit of worms in there. Like I say though, the whole 4 bin systems put together, from my experience, does not have more than a pound of worms. You see a lot of worms, but they're pretty skinny. A little malnourished from not being fed. Okay, all the worm factories are empty, and that's what we got for a pile of castings. Probably about 15 gallons of castings. And we're going to take these over to the hose sprayer, clean them up, and we'll probably come back to this pile. Like I say, I'm going to feed it and get the worms up to the top, and then we'll probably come back to this pile and let you know what we get from it. The reason I'm doing this video basically is to let you see the cleanup that's involved with the worm factory and how they've worked. The castings are good castings, but sometimes, sometimes it's easier to restart the bin than it would be to just feed the top, because like these ones, they were so done already that there would be no drainage on what you did next. The worms are alive. If you have space to do an outside compost, this might be the thing to do. Dump your bin out, feed the top of it. But most likely you bought the worm factory because you needed to be inside with it. So this is one solution to starting or restarting your worm factory.